The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Okay, welcome back to the Retro Rangers podcast. I am your host, George Grimm, and I am joined this evening by former Ranger intern Steve Choppy as we pay tribute to longtime Rangers PR director John Halligan, who passed away on this day in the year 2010. Okay, welcome to the podcast, Steve. How you doing?
I'm doing fine, George, and thank you for having me.
Okay.
Pleasure to be here.
Okay, now, as far as Halligan, I have to admit that he was my hero as a kid. I realized very early in life that I was never going to be a Ranger and play on the ice, so Halligan became my hero. He seemed to have the perfect job.
He definitely did.
He was born in 1941. He graduated from Fordham University in 1963. Wait, I got ahead of myself. He grew up in Bergen County, and he played hockey on ponds as a kid. His first Ranger experience was when his older brother took him to Madison Square Garden to see the Blue Shirts, and he fell in love with them right then and there. He graduated from Fordham University in June '63. A few months later, he got a seasonal job as the assistant to the PR guy who was Herb Gorin at the time. Within a year, Herb Gorin left the Rangers to move to the NHL. So 23-year-old John Halligan became the Rangers PR director. Now, at that time, he had a very small staff. He had Art Friedman as his statistician, and he had a woman named Janet Frasetti, who turned out to be his wife after a while. They got married. That's how he began a long career as a publicist, author, historian, raconteur, and all-around nice guy and friend to all. Now, as far as the Ranger PR office when you worked there in the 80s, right?
That's correct. The 82-83 season is when.
Okay, how many people did they have working there then?
They had John and Janet. They had Arthur Friedman was still there, impeccably keeping stats on paper with a pencil and an eraser. Yeah. Incredibly accurate and consistently accurate. There was interns besides that full-time staff. That was it. That was the full-time staff. John, Janet, and Arthur. They filled the interns. A lot of times they would go with two interns in the office, and quite frequently they would get them from St. John's University. My understanding was St. John's University had a sports management curriculum, and a number of the students that were in that curriculum who were interested in hockey were the number one considerations for them to use. And when I got in there, I pretty much was determined that I was going to be the only guy. I can get into that a little later, but I didn't want to have anyone in the office with me at my level. I kind of wanted to hog the whole thing to make myself as visible as possible. But that was it. They pretty much had the skeleton crew there as well, but a hard-working group, and a group that always had their finger on the pulse. The office was constantly featuring people coming in and out, general managers. At the time, it was Craig Patrick. Not so much the coaching. Herb Brooks, who was the coach at the time, stayed pretty much at the practice rink and was there for games. Occasionally, he'd pop in on game nights a couple hours before the game would the home game would start, and just to really say hi. But that was it. So it was pretty much still a small crew, but got a lot of work done.
Yeah. What since you only had 3 people working there most of the time, and they had to reorganize the Ranger Blue Book, which at the time was maybe 20 pages. Each player had half a page with a thumbnail picture, and they reorganized it and remade it into the NHL yearbook that it is now, and John also would take films of the Ranger games, and he would run the projector after practice and show those films. In fact, those films in '68, when the Rangers moved to the new Garden, those films and quite a all that other information all got thrown out, and John had to save it. He had to dive into the garbage and save it, and so the films that you see on the MSG Raw program once in a while were probably all saved by John Halligan, because they would have been thrown out and lost forever. So we can thank him for that.
Yes, he had a nose for being archiving things. That was a thing, an aspect of his job there that didn't get as much attention as his general PR director responsibilities carried. But he was an archivist. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce that, but he was big on saving stuff. He had his office bookshelves was loaded with all types of hockey hardcovers from various authors, not only in New York but from around the NHL. He put together an incredible, and remember, this was obviously well pre-internet and well pre-computer usage. Everything was pretty much pen, paper, Rolodex, you name it, that type of thing, carbon paper, what have you. He put together an incredible clippings file in which clippings from the major New York papers, the Times, the Post, Newsday, the Star Ledger in New Jersey. He was constant daily news. Every morning was, and it became the responsibility of the intern to go through these newspapers and clip anything and everything about not only the Rangers but all the NHL and all the other players. So not only box scores, but information on games or team or player status was saved, cataloged, and basically put into envelopes and dropped into a file folder.
Wow.
You kind of had to handwrite the date on it because it was physically clipped from the newspaper, so you had to handwrite the date on it. And put them away, but it was extensive. I often wonder what happened to them now, if it was scanned and saved. I've got to believe that they were saved in some fashion, but it's been a few years now, so I'm not exactly sure how the procedures work now. But there's quite often we had our noses in there pulling information for either printed material, game notes, the things of that nature. So that was the doings of John as well. So he definitely had a nose for saving history, basically, as you mentioned, him pulling out the films and what have you. But that was one of the many things that made him a true professional in what he was doing.
Yeah. Okay, how about working for John? What was that like? What was he like to work for?
That was incredible. This was a man that I was pretty much knowledgeable on, like any other fan. He got some FaceTime with Bill Chadwick, who did the color commentary on the Ranger away games, which was all we got back then in the New York area. WOR, it was frequently Bill Chadwick and Jim Gordon doing the play-by-play. John would appear on there, especially around, I'd say, maybe a third of the way into the season, just before Christmas or so. He would get on there and plug the yearbook, which of course was also put together by the PR office. And
right.
He I'm watching it as a young fan and thinking this guy's full of energy, full loaded with smiles. I don't think that the man ever frowned in all the months that I knew him. I never saw a frown on his face, and kind of was a very compelling person and got my attention. Always kind of liked him. I recall when Ranger tickets would go on sale to the general public on a given day. Let's say the box office was open at 9. Tons of people would line up outside the box office at the Garden and wait for it to open and pick up whatever individual game tickets they could. We were there several years in a row, and who comes waltzing past us on his way to the office was John Halligan, and I was just thought, oh wow, there's John Halligan, the PR guy for the Rangers. He stopped. He talked to a plethora of people on the way into work. So he was very visible, very friendly, very approachable. When I got the opportunity to be with him in the office, I was kind of like walking on eggshells because this was a guy who, as you said, kind of like a hero. Kind of somebody you looked up to. Who's really generated a lot of positiveness and energy, and he showed that in the office as well. He was tireless. He was the best pluck typer that I've ever met in my life. His 2 index fingers were all he used on an old-fashioned typewriter in which you had to really push down on the keys to get that thing to register. But to kick that hammer onto that paper and get that stuff printed. But I was kind of impressed with that. And he just was a guy who would always make you feel welcome. Day one, I kind of reported mainly to Janet as my first person there. In terms of hierarchy, John was then after Janet, but he's always made me know that, as he stressed, you're not working for me, you're working with me. Not only did he say it, but he lived it in the office with how he did. So it was pretty incredible. It's kind of like working with a hero that you kind of always look up to, and provided very endless amount of experiences and stories and things of that nature. But it was really, really enjoyable and fulfilling. Couldn't believe I was there. I had to pinch myself every day to realize that I'm working in Madison Square Garden for this season under John Halligan. You can't do much better than that.
I can imagine. They always say he was very welcoming. He always had a smile on his face. And if you told him, who you are, he would actually remember your name next time he saw you. I had that happen to me. I saw him on the Ranger games on Channel 9, and when I saw him at the Garden, I went up and I introduced myself. And the next time he saw me, he said, "Hi, George, how you doing?" So, and that's really something when you think about it, all the people he would meet. So.
Oh yeah. Yeah, he had a photographic memory, and I guess you have to if you're going to be a success in that business. You have to, but he never forgot. Yeah. He never forgot. He met my cousins one time when I had them at a game as a guest, and after the game we they welcomed all. Well, I was already in the press room after the game doing my post game duties, and he said, "Bring your cousin in. Let them come on in, and sit down in the lounge, have a beer." And he remembered my cousin's name, even though I only saw him maybe once or twice after that the whole season. So I concur in what you're saying, that the guy never forgot a name, never forgot a face, and never forgot a story or a joke.
Yeah, or a joke. He was pretty funny too. As those old games on Channel 9, when Win Elliott did the games, John used to be on with him, and in the last game of the season, the Rangers weren't going to make the playoffs that year, and Win was thanking everyone who helped with the broadcast, and he says, "I want to thank my good friend John Lanigan," instead of Halligan. He said Lanigan. So that got a big laugh out of John at the time. So.
Yeah, I was when I started watching him, it was I believe it was Jim Gordon. Jim Gordon and Bill Chadwick had just left the radio booth where he was doing color with Marv Albert. And the first this is just when I started to follow the team. I guess it was right around 1970 or so, and he would how shall I say, he was lost my train of thought for a moment there, but he was I remember Gordon and Chadwick doing the games. I remember the name Win Elliott, but I never met him because, again, my following of the team happened just after Gordon and Chadwick took over on the TV airways for WOR.
That's right. Through all those years, he was a mentor and friend to a lot of people. There's one report that there was a beat writer on the Rangers beat who was at a road game, and he had a problem drinking. He used to drink a lot, and he had a problem getting his game notes back to his newspaper. And so John got on the typewriter, typed out the game story and sent it into the newspaper for the guy, and that's how he was. He wanted to get the Rangers in the paper any way he could. So, and that was what he did.
Oh yeah, he definitely had a nose for what was newsworthy, and you don't learn that in a class. You have that. That's an innate thing that you have within you. Something strikes you, that it's going to be important enough to garner some attention, and he used that talent many times, and not only with information and things of that nature concerning the games of the team, but in things that spin off of that and are kind of parallel to it, but not specifically, how shall I say it, the X's and O's, who scored the goal, who made the assist, things of that nature. He was quite talented in that regard. The man was the man was one of the people, and I venture to say probably one of the few people that actually wound up doing for a living what he was born to do. He found that, and he ran with that for a very long time, both with the Rangers and after the Rangers, with the NHL for a while. Then he came back to the club to finish things off. But remarkable guy, and he rubbed off on a lot of people, influenced a lot of people, and bent over backwards to try to help folks as well.
Right.
So the man was was taken from us way too soon, but
Yes.
left us with some fond memories. Left me with some fond memories. I still am tickled to death to tell people that I worked with John Halligan for a season. Tremendous memories.
Yeah. Well, with the Ranger fans back then felt like they had a friend in the Ranger organization when John was involved, because they could walk up to him and talk to him, and he was always a friendly face. And with the NHL, when he left the Rangers to go to the NHL, that was when the NHL president was John Ziegler, and they needed some PR help back then, because Ziegler was not the best at what he did, and they needed some PR help from someone who knew how to handle the press and everything. So that's why he went to the NHL. And then a few years later, he came back to the Rangers for a little while. But he always made people feel like they had a friend in a Ranger organization that sometimes wasn't too friendly, and I can understand that. So.
Oh yeah, definitely if you're going to pick a face for the organization, as far as the media is concerned, he was the guy. I don't think I've met a couple of the other PR directors who would travel with their teams when the clubs came into the Garden to play. A number of them traveled with the teams, which John did as well earlier in his career.
Sure.
And he and Chadwick, he palled around with Chadwick a lot as Bill was out there with the radio crew and what have you. So they were buddies. In fact, it was probably not a day went by where Bill Chadwick wasn't spending a couple hours in the office. He had already been retired and wanted to be around the game that he loved, and it made him a successful person. And so Chadwick would hang around the Garden, and mostly with John, and they'd run out to lunch together, come back, kind of toy around a little with small things to help John out with, but really it was just to keep him busy as he was there. But the guy had tons of stories and funny ones from when they were out on the road doing things. And the people, the PR directors that came in and who we met from other clubs, yeah, they were professional. Yes, they were nice and friendly, but they didn't have that vibe. They didn't have that. I don't know how to. I don't want to say a sincere vibe. I do believe that they were all sincere, but the charisma is probably the best word to use. They were good. They were friendly, but they didn't have the Halligan charisma. And I'll tell you, they broke the mold on the Halligan charisma the day that man was born. He just had it. It radiated, and you're right. He made that team, gave them a positive face out there to the media and to the fans. So they couldn't have gone wrong with him. Well, look how long he was there for. You don't get a job in New York, right? And that's where, especially at that level and in that industry, the PR business and the pro sports PR business in New York City, you don't retain those jobs if you're not excelling at it. And my gosh, he excelled. It was just incredible. And he worked for a number of general managers, for all those years. And they all loved him. They all relied on him. They knew what they had. And they weren't going to let him go anywhere. And therefore, there goes his long, that laid the groundwork for a long career.
He won the Lester Patrick Award in 2007 for service to hockey in the USA, and actually that's an award that he helped to create in 1966 with Bill Jennings and Emil Francis, and his longtime friend and the former editor of Gold magazine, named Stu Hackle. Actually wrote a nice column about him after he passed away. It was called The Morning Skate, and it was Mourning. It was in the New York Times. And if any of our listeners can get a hold of that, you'd probably really enjoy it. With the Halligan, hockey players sometimes have thin skin, and like general managers and coaches as well. And so he had to be careful about what was said and by who. So he really had to walk on eggshells once in a while, but he was able to navigate it well, and I never heard any complaints about him. And as you said, he was there a long time, so he was good at his job. And as you said, it was a job that he was made for.
Oh, completely. He knew how to read a person, read a situation, and would then follow it up by knowing exactly what to say, and knowing exactly what not to say. Which change the course of a conversation or an interview by saying the wrong thing. He knew what not to say. He knew what to say based upon each individual person he dealt with. Again, something that you don't teach, something that is just part of you. Sure.
Yeah. In 1988 through 1993, I published a newsletter called Sportstat, the Ranger Report, and I used to send copies to John all the time, and he used to write me back, and he would critique some things or correct my grammar once in a while, and he would answer the questions that I would post in there. He would be the only one who could answer the trivia questions. And if the truth be told, I probably wouldn't be posting this podcast had it not been for John Halligan. In the early 2000s, I didn't think that my writing was going anywhere, and I was ready to give it up. I had lost my motivation. But then, right around that time, John was actually trying to put together a book of fan memories, and he asked me to write something for him, and I was thrilled. John Halligan asked me to write something for him, and I wrote him something up, and he liked it. He said he's going to use it, but unfortunately, he passed away before that book was published. But when that happened, it really, got my mojo back, and from there on, I moved on to InsideHockey.com and the Retro Rangers column, and I started writing more interviews and writing books. I wrote my Emil Francis book, We Did Everything But Win, which I actually on the front cover I mentioned John and my father. My father had introduced me to the Rangers, and John had pushed me to write about them. So, and then after that came two more books, and the podcast and the baseball book with Ralph Tycho, and it's everything that has happened since then is probably because of John Halligan's faith in me. Just asked me to write him something, and it's really something that I can really thank him for. I'm really grateful to John for doing that, because I would not be doing any of this if it wasn't for that. So I'm very grateful to him for that.
Well, if you're going to have a catalyst to help move you along, that's the type of catalyst you'd want, because he was very encouraging, made you feel like you knew what direction you were heading in, what you were doing. Like you said, he would tweak things along the way. I myself had done some writing for various team publications. what have you. And John was right. He was basically he was my editor. He looked things over, maybe tweaked a paragraph or two here or there, kind of fine-tuned it, tied it up a little bit neater, removed some words if I was getting a little bit too wordy, and helped you. He let you realize your self-worth, and would then help that grow. And there's things that I learned under that man that stayed with me both professionally and personally, still even to today. And I credit him for it as well. So I know exactly what you're saying about him being an integral part of you getting your mojo back. And I'm glad he did, because your writings and your books are incredible. I've had a wonderful time. The Emil Francis book brought back a ton of memories for me. And, again, I guess we have to thank John for kind of moving that along, for stirring your mojo back up for you, because it worked. That's for sure.
Yeah. As an intern, how did your view of the Rangers change from when you were just a fan, like from the inside and the outside? As you're a fan, you were looking at the team from the outside, but as a intern, you're looking at them from the inside. How did your view of the team and hockey itself change at that time?
Well, I think more so than anything, although I tried to, and I tried to convince myself and those who would listen, that once I got the job there, that I wasn't a wide-eyed fan. I wasn't as what would be the right words, tickled pink to be part of it. That I was a company man, that type of a thing. That I wasn't going to look at them as my sports heroes, and treat it more like a job. Well, I lied to those people, because honestly, I was tickled pink every day I stepped into that building. I balanced the two. I knew when yes, you're a fan doing something that you never believed you get a chance at, but I never let it affect my day-to-day duties and such. So from that point of view, although again, I'm tickled pink, but I'm also there to provide a function. I saw that you realize the personality of some of the staff and some of the players. Didn't have a lot of, because they practiced in Rye at the time at Playland, and they came down. They were at the Garden. They came down to the Garden for their games, and game nights are just crazy and go and a million things to do both before, during, and after. But you picked up a vibe on some of the players, and some of the players that I thought were tremendous individuals, maybe people, as opposed to just hockey players. You find out that so-and-so's, he's a good hockey player, but he might not be the most friendly individual. Not even just because they didn't know me, but I was in the dressing room every night after a game, because that's what we had to do. There was a certain, I believe it was 10 minutes or 15 minutes after a game, in which the locker room door was closed. It was no access to anyone. Allow the players who wants to jump into the shower early to avoid the media if they wanted to, or who would want to just get out of the building or do whatever they needed to do. And then 10, 15 minutes afterwards, the doors would open, the media would be allowed in. And that's one of the things I had to do, along with our game night staff, which was kind of, help people along, answer any questions, bring so-and-so over to such and such a player. And that's when you got to really pick up on the personalities of some of these guys. Some of them were I was a little bit disappointed in, because again, you saw them as you're the hockey players for your favorite team. When you got to witness and experience their personalities up front and I don't want to say personal, but up front, you realize that, maybe not so. But that was very few. As you grow, get older, you realize that, there are, and I was 21 years old at the time, so I was still very impressionable. But
Right.
You realize that, different people have different personalities and what have you. And some are a surprise. Some are, Dave Maloney, for one, was an incredible, he was the most friendliest guy ever, always greeted me with a smile and would always have time to chat a little bit. I was a Don Maloney fan. I love Don Maloney, but Dave was a little bit more personal. Don wasn't bad, but Dave shone over and above what you'd expect. Now, to see him on the ice as a player, you never would realize that. A couple of them were very, very quiet. I do remember the few times that I was up at Rye or in the building. Some didn't have would look right through you as if you weren't there. Not too many, so that kind of it brought me around to realizing that, again, this is not everything is as it appears sometimes, but invariably nothing really to complain about either. So that was kind of interesting. Staff-wise, Nick Guerin was the trainer. He was he was more like he wasn't the medical trainer. He was more of like he was older. He was close to retirement, and he was kind of running the dressing room, and he always had time for me and explained some things to me and about how things worked. So getting to see everything from the inside out gave you a little bit of a different perspective in a good way. But you saw the point where, as I mentioned earlier, they're not just your hockey player heroes; they're regular people. They're coming to do their job and go home when it's over. That was kind of neat to see that.
Right. Back in the 80s, when I was doing sports stat, Barry Watkins was the Ranger PR guy, and he invited me to come over for a game day and work in the PR office. And it was a long day. We had to make up the press packages for all the visiting and Ranger media. We used to have to put together these long 8.5 by 14 pieces of paper with all those clippings on it from all over, from the local papers and from the out-of-state papers. And I think John Rosacco was the statistician, and he would, there would be pages and pages of stats, and then there's game notes on those long sheets of paper, and they all had to be carried up to the press room, and then after the game, the press people had to wait till all the interviews were done, and I don't know what time they went home. I went home when I was ready to go home, but I don't know when how long they stayed after the game. So it's a long day for those people, and you have to feel for them.
Yes. By all means, very long day. I recall, I pretty much, even though it was just on paper listed as a part-time internship, a couple of days a week. Again, they wanted to flip it around with a couple of part-timers during the day. I was able to work it out where I turned it into a full-time job. My theory was that I have this opportunity. I want to give it my all and just pour myself into it, and I did. So on non-game days, I would take the bus in from New Jersey, and of course home. Game days, I would drive in because I knew it was an earlier morning, and as you mentioned, who knows when the night is going to end. So I didn't want to have something go past bus ride and then wind up having to spend the night in the city or whatever.
I know.
So, it was a very long day, and there was nothing like real when everything was done, said and done at the end of the game. All the media were taken care of and entertained in whatever fashion they had to. All the statistics were entered. The official score sheet was entered and distributed. Actually, it was distributed to the team's PR office, the opponent's next game's opponent was also getting a copy of this, as were the Rangers' next opponent, so that they could have the time to put their press notes together based upon the information they got from our game. And sometimes, it took a while to get some information, to get some score sheet, whatever. So you never knew when the night was going to end. But when it was over, you were exhausted, but you did feel that job well done, kind of thing. Pat yourself on the back, because it was it's encroaching on the close to midnight a couple of times. So yeah, long day, busy day. The putting the press notes together, that didn't change. It sounded like you had done exactly the same thing that I had done at that point. I remember getting out manila envelopes for various suites in the garden for the brass of the garden got their press kit, as did the media people and whatever. But that all came from our office. It all had to be done and collated. This is older times now. Had to be collated by hand, collated, stapled, counted out, all that kind of stuff. And it was all from us. But there was never, phone would stop ringing, and that was one of my other responsibilities, to be the first in line to pick up the phone, and not necessarily screen a call, but realize, is this something I could just jot down on paper and give to whomever? Most likely it was Janet Halligan who they needed to speak to. And, do I jot that down on a legal pad and hand it over to Janet? Is it something I could do myself? So you had to make a lot of split-second decisions to keep everybody happy and fulfilled. And, you work that in with everything else that we were doing. There was no time for any wandering or goofing off, so to speak. It was even the only time we could really, when we were up in the press box during the game, there wasn't, and the play was going on, there wasn't too much going on. Just watch the game. But in between periods, again, open up the floodgates. You got that time to do whatever you need to do, distribute the stats from the first period or the second period, whichever. So, yeah, you were go. When my head hit the pillow at the end of those nights, I was probably awake for 1 or 2 seconds and then out like a light. That's how much and how busy we were. But, gosh, it was a lot of fun, I have to say.
Right. How about the off days? What do you do when the Rangers are off and they're up and right practicing?
Standard office stuff. Again, phones ringing. There was some simple clerical type work. All the mail that came into our office. It was my job to separate the mail and to get it where it needed to go. There were inside a closet at the general manager's office, or actually the annex to the office where their assistants were. At the time, they were called secretaries, and there was a closet there that had little mail slots with each player's name on it. They got fan mail. The letters and such went in there. Anything that was for whomever, be it Craig Patrick, be it Herb Brooks, got delivered to the appropriate secretary, or the secretary that was handling that individual person's mail and work such as that. That went on a daily basis. There was never a time when you didn't get a ton of mail in that office. There was that. There was clipping the various newspapers and filing those away. taking credential requests from various media that would call. I was unable. It wasn't my job to fill those requests, but it's my responsibility to list who had called, what they needed, what they would need in terms of credentials. Get that over to Janet, and she would coordinate it, run it back and forth between the box office and up where we were on the fourth floor. Because at the time, again, no smartphones. Your tickets weren't on your phone then. They were regular, hard, cardboard, tickets or press credentials. So I had to run those down to the box office, the will call for those people for games that would be coming up in the near future. Always answer the phone call, answer the phones. Again, the morning after our home games, predictably so, I'd get a call. I don't know. I'm thinking maybe 9 o'clock in the morning or so, 9:30, from a man named John Davidson, who was at the time one of the assistants in terms of working with the goalies, if I remember correctly. And John would call down from Rye and ask for the report, the statistics from the night before's game, ice time, goals, assists, plus minus, things of that nature, and he would then do whatever he needed to do with that to convey it to Herb Brooks and the people that were actually running the practice. So there was things such as that. There was the Ranger hotline, which at the time, those who may not know about it, it was, again, no internet. So if you wanted to get information on the Rangers or whatever happened the night before, or general news in Rangerland, dial up the 24 hours a day, the New York Ranger hotline, and you'd find me on there giving a report to whatever was pertinent or whatever. So we weren't as busy and crazy as game days or game nights, whatever, but there was always something to do, always plenty to do. Labor of love, though, it was, for sure.
Good. Well, thank you, Steve. That was very interesting, and it's good to have you on again, and we'll have to do it again. I thank you for coming on. I thank everyone for listening. This has been the Retro Rangers podcast. I'm George Grimm, and I'm here with Steve Choppy, and I hope you enjoyed the show. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you, George.
Bye-bye.
The proceeding has been a Comfortably Zoned network production. You are advised to keep your dreams wet, your humor dry, your children and grandchildren out of military recruiting offices and off the laps of clerics who wear dresses. Thank you for listening, everyone. Happy trails.